I also forgot to do the pretty cover slide because attention to detail, despite being a BA, sometimes isn't my strongest suit. I'm also going to do a James Burney. He's a thought worker, or an ex-thought worker, who spoke at Lead Dev, who did a selfie before he went on, so it's now become known as a James Burney, to do a selfie with your audience. So just excuse me while I get you all in. You wrote 1, 2, 3. Perfect, thank you very much. Right. Now, we discover that I need to log in. So, welcome to the fine art of not fitting in, or how to be genderqueer in a corporate world. Hopefully my voice will hold out for this. Oh, one last thing. I'm going to put a timer on for 20 minutes, because I don't talk with notes, and I'm going to try to do this in around 20 minutes. So that leaves you lots of times to ask me questions about the stuff that's there. I also want to give a trigger warning and a content warning. There will be swearing, and there will be stuff that sounds horrific. And it was, but through counselling, I'm at a point where I can talk about it, but I just want you to be aware that if it's a bit tough, please understand why I'm talking about it. So first off, what is genderqueer? Let's just... A BA managed to work their laptop, so we get a clap. So a very quick gender lesson, so that you're all on the same page. This is the gender binary. There are men on one side, women on the other. People can move across it, people can stay in the middle. My relationship to this is I'm somewhere else finding coffee. I really don't care about the gender binary. It doesn't play any part in how I see myself at all. That's the closest explanation I've got to what genderqueer means to me. So how do you get to that point? And I want to run you through a little bit of my life. So I was born the day the men who landed on the moon returned to Earth. And until I was 12, I used that fact to explain why I didn't fit, because I said I was an alien. So I thought that that was the perfect day for aliens to come and replace all the babies with alien children, because that made sense as to why I wasn't like all the other kids. So when I was born, my genitals were examined, as everyone's are, and it was determined that I was a girl, a girl child. So my mother dressed me in pretty little fluffy things and did my hair in a particular way. And here I am about 10 or so. Even for the standards of the 80s, this is not quite normal for a girl. But at this point, I was quite firmly believing I was an alien, because that was the only explanation I could find for why I didn't fit in like the other kids, why I wasn't like them in the way that I thought about what my gender was. But we didn't really talk about gender, it was just kids. So, cut forward a few years, I arrived in London in 2005. In 2004, the Gender Recognition Act had been passed, which allowed people to legally transition from one side of the gender binary to the other and have all of their documentation updated. And this was really important, and the people who I met were the people who were involved with that and were trans. So I went through an exploratory phase where I was trying to uncover what I was. What was I part of this trans narrative? Was my story about moving from one side of that binary to the other? Was it about moving to the middle of the binary? Or where was the binary involved in all of this? Cut to now, I have just updated my New Zealand passport, who allows self-identification. So on my New Zealand passport, I get to state my gender as a sentence. You state your gender and how you'd like this represented on your gender marker and how many years you've lived this gender. So after some long discussions with some lovely friends, we described my gender as transgressive, non-binary, genderqueer. Now, to the queers in the audience, I know non-binary and genderqueer don't normally sit together. See the first word, transgressive. Whenever people have tried to pin me down, I have done my best to break out of that box. So you'll also note that I won't introduce myself until the very end of this, because, see the first word here, I'm not going to play by everyone else's rules. So you'll see more of these portraits in a mo. So I want to introduce you to a little bit of vocabulary and tell you some stories around that vocabulary, and you understand why I'm talking about it. And this is all about normativity. So it's all about how society sees us and what is considered normal. So the first one is heteronormativity. So the idea of this is that a relationship is between a man and a woman, or a woman and a man, and that's the main sort of relationship. Now, this normativity plays into my life when I go for a job interview and the person says to me, oh, I met you at the insert company here, because I'm aware this is being recorded, I met you at the insert company here Christmas party. You were snogging your girlfriend in the garden. Now, the second half of that sentence is really important because they mentioned it 3 times during the interview. The other part that's important is those particular parties were a little bit wild and we weren't the only couple in the garden, but it was very important to her that I was snogging somebody else that they read as a woman in that garden. That meant, of course, I didn't get a call back for that interview no matter how well I did, because that person's view of normativity was that I was outside of that normal. Now, there's another thing called homonormativity. So this is the idea that a homosexual relationship looks just like a heterosexual relationship. There's 2 people, they might be of the same gender, but they do the same things. They get together, they get married, they have children, they get a picket fence and a house and all of those things. So when you're a queer and you're an anarchist and you're polyamorous, I have multiple partners, people say, oh, could you try to be, I know it's good that you're gay, but could you try to be a little less gay at work? I mean, seriously, how could I be less gay? But people ask me to tone myself down. People say, it's great that you're political, it's great that you're out, but could you try to be a little less out at clients? Actual comments from places where I've worked. Chrononormativity, this is a tricky one. Chrono meaning time, normative meaning normal. So this is the idea that we all do things at the same pace and at the same time. So we're born, we go to school, we maybe have a gap year if you're British or earn some money if you're not. You go to university, you meet somebody, kind of try a few things, you meet somebody you settle down with that person, you leave university, you start your first job, you get a flat together, you kind of think about kids, you get on the property ladder, you do all of those things, and there's an expectation in society that we all do things at the same time. So if you do things out of order, or if you do things slightly differently that bust that up, that creates, oh, you're not normal inside somebody's brain. So that impacts me. I used to work, I still occasionally do, as a DJ and as a club promoter for little queer fun clubs. And I will go out photographing 4 nights a week. And people at work say to me, aren't you a bit old for doing that stuff? Aren't you a bit old for going out and clubbing? It's like, no, I'm not. I can still go out clubbing, and I don't drink, and I don't really take any recreational drugs. And I make it to work at 9:30, and I drink a vast amount of coffee like everyone else. And I work just like everyone else, but I spend my evenings doing something different to going home and being normative, and that gets brought up during reviews that I'm not committed to the job, or I don't pay enough attention to things, even though I'm performing exactly the same as everyone else. Cisnormativity. So this is the idea that as somebody who's trans or trans-identified, my goal is to look as much like a cis man or a cis woman as possible. So this is the idea that even though I'm non-binary and trans, I need to fit into either as close as possible to one bucket or the other. Now, this came up at a job when I did Movember, because my dad died of prostate cancer. Well, no, my dad died of cancer. Prostate cancer was one of the cancers that he'd had. So I discovered Movember is only okay if you can grow the moustache or you look sexy when you wear a fake one. So I ran around Soho, the centre of London, and Oxford Circus for a month with fake moustaches in various styles on my face. I was the second largest fundraiser in the company for Movember, but what it meant was when it came time to renew my contract, it wasn't renewed, because they thought that this had been inappropriate, despite the fact that I'd cleared it with them before I did it, because I said, look, I want to do this, and cleared that I'd have no client contact during that time, because they thought this was a bit extreme to show clients. These days I'd basically go, sod it, nah, but that's a whole separate thing, which I'll talk about. So my body is totally political. how I look, how I dress every day is a political act. So I work as an artist, so one of the things I'm going to do is show you a little bit of my art. And this was a self-portraiture series that I did called Dress Code. And it's about how people read me, how people look at me and read my gender and read things. So, a very quick explanation. I'm 50 years old. I love the fact that this entire convention is based around the fact of Apollo returning, and I'm like, yay, perfect timing. No one actually has to do the maths on my age this time. Normally you see people sitting there going, so what year was the moon landing? What does that make them? I'm a consultant, I'm a business analyst, and I have a PhD. And I have this body. Now, this is what this body should be presented like if you follow the magazines. This is me, believe it or not. Most people go, huh? It's me. I've got a wig on, obviously, but it's all styled according to the magazines. And if we have time, I can talk through this completely. But we don't, so we'll flip on. But this is, when people read my CV, this is a very normative view of how they think I might look. Because when you're meeting a 50-year-old person with a PhD who's a consultant, this is kind of the image that you have. And then I walk in. This image is political because the agency, the digital agency that I was working at when it was taken, refused it as my headshot. Because the clients might be the shirt would offend the client's sensibilities. I like loud clothing, you know. I like to be the loudest dressed person in the room because it gives people something to talk about when they try and describe me. That's not about my gender. Because how do you describe the person in the corner, the person that they need to go see? Oh, they're so-and-so's about 50, they've got grey hair, and they're wearing black. Oh, and he's a man. It's kind of how people tend to say it. With me, it's kind of like, Jay, loud. You'll spot them, you'll hear them. They're there. They're probably gesticulating wildly. So, but I had to do a toned-down version in a white shirt for that, to have my headshot allowed on our web pages. Even in black and white, this was considered a bit much. Now, another agency that I worked at, some of these were dreadful. I've actually been in counselling for the PTSD caused by these people. This image, this style was not a choice, but it's still political because the client, we were going to see clients. The agency demanded that I dress more like the clients. And I said, okay, fine, I'll wear a suit with a loud shirt. And they said, no, you'll wear a white shirt and a sober tie. So the suit cost me £2 from eBay. It still fits really well. It's actually not too bad. And it's dark grey with a light blue through it. So have a white shirt and the tie is, and you can't quite see it here, is a dark blue with a royal blue fleur-de-lis kind of pattern on it, or paisley pattern on it, that picks out the blue and the blue stripe. I do stylish. If I'm going to do something, I do it well. I look like a 14-year-old boy at a wedding because my face doesn't have any hard edges. I don't have any masculinization in my face. I've got no brows, everything's quite feminine in my face. So you have somebody wearing very traditional men's clothing with a very soft face, which makes me look about 14. I'm 46 in that photo. I look 14. I'm the senior project manager. I'm their lead. I'm the senior consultant, and I walk in looking like a 14-year-old boy. And their biggest complaint was that the tie was too loud. And that's why the client didn't respond to me. I'm just like, you really need to understand that I know what I'm talking about. This is I think it's from about my third week at working at ThoughtWorks. And it's political because it's the first time that I got to really dress as me. Now, it's quite a scruffy me, admittedly, but I just dyed my hair. So, chatting to the MD of the time, who's a lovely man called Kristen, who's now the MD in Australia. No, there was a COO at the time. He's now MD in Australia. Get it right, the right way round. We were chatting about going on this project, and it was a big client, financial client, so it was like, okay, you need to suit and boot. Here's some of the stuff you're going to be doing. It's, first project at a new job. There's a little bit of nerves, so we get through that discussion, and I'm still nervous. Kristen's like, huh? Why are you still nervous? Why? What's going on? What's going on? And I said, well, mate, if you want me to change my hair colour, this takes 2 days to get out, 2 days of bleaching, and the only colour it will go will be bright orange, because whatever dye I throw at it, that's a natural hair colour, will come out bright orange. And he was like, Sodom. If they don't want the blue hair, Sodom, we don't want them as a client. Now, that was the first time in the entirety of my life, of my working life, that somebody had said to me, you're okay. We will make the world accept you. We'll back you up in being yourself at work. You don't have to suddenly wear a suit or do something. You need to look tidy, but you can be yourself. And that was the most amazing feeling. And I still tear up when I talk about it. For Kristen, when I told him, a couple of months later, I was like, mate, that was the most, because he's Australian. I said, mate, that was the most amazing thing you ever said to me, and it meant so much, and it was, just made me really understand this place. And he was like, don't even remember saying it, but it does sound like me, because it was so normal for him. It was such a normal sentiment. Putting all this energy out there to be different, to be seen as yourself, can make you a very, very angry person. One of the things that I've uncovered and had to work through is the fact that I constantly had my fists up. The best form of defense was a good attack. I was always ready to fight the world. And that makes you absolutely exhausted. And that's what a lot of people have to go through every day when you don't fit into what society deems as normal, because you're constantly having to fight to be seen, to fight to be seen as yourself, the fight to even be yourself. It just goes on and on and on. So, just a quick side note. That's talking about being queer in a corporate world. It's going to be easy being corporate in a queer world, isn't it? It's not really. What I found was a lot of people couldn't understand why I would continue fighting to be in a space that really obviously didn't want me, that really was kind of constantly saying, no, you're not normal enough for us. And it's like, well, why do you want to work there? And it's like, because I can make a difference. I can change it. I'm just an eternal optimist, or just have no sense of self-preservation. We're not quite sure which. But one of the things from queer theory is that you can hold two views in opposition. So I can be both corporate and queer. I'm not only corporate, but also queer. So both of those identities, although you might think they're in opposition to each other, they exist within me. And I can be both of those at the same time. There is no opposition between them. And that non-binariness doesn't just impact on my gender, it impacts on how I see myself and how I see my life. So here's some practical stuff. How do we, this room here, make space for people who are different inside of our world? How do we do that? And these are tips that don't require any policies, don't require any procedures. HR won't need to be involved. Your diversity and an inclusion person will probably know about some of these, but these are just stuff that you can do and then tell them that you've done it later. Pronouns. Pronouns, everyone's got one. It's what you use instead of somebody's name when you're talking about them. Now, I can only do English. My apologies, because Kai gave a really great talk yesterday evening with this in more than one language. I can only do this in one language, so I'll do it in this language. So pronouns can be he, she, or they. And they, even if it refers to a single person, as they are. So you just keep it the same. And there are some more varied ones like ze, her, and it. Now, with my accent, when I say her, H-I-R, and when I say her, H-E-R, no one can tell the difference. My apologies to anyone who chooses her as their pronoun, because I'm always going to sound like I'm saying it wrong. It's really easy if somebody doesn't say their pronouns to get them. You just say, hi, which pronoun do you prefer? Now, preference is there to soften the language. There's no way you can say the sentence with a passive-aggressive tone. There's no way you can say the sentence in a way that demeans the person that you're asking of it, that you makes it their problem. Oh, that's not too bad. That you make it their problem, that you can't guess their pronouns. So which pronoun do you prefer? It's like saying, oh, are you Bob or Robert? Which do you prefer? If they say Robert, you're never going to call them Bob. If I say my pronouns they, you're probably going to use that. Introductions include pronouns. Because if only I have to state my pronoun in the room, it feels a bit weird. It's kind of like, do I have to do this? It's kind of a bit uncomfortable to do it if you're the only person doing it. So, introductions include pronouns. So, finally, the introduction. Hi, I'm Dr. J, and my pronoun is they. It's that simple. That's how you do introductions. If you get it wrong, say sorry, correct it, and move along. Don't make it about you. If you get my pronoun wrong, just say, oh, sorry, they. Move along. Continue with the sentence. You don't need to worry about apologizing or falling over your sword or saying, well, I'm not that sort of person. I really want to be a good ally. You know, it's like, go home and practice. Go home and practice saying sentences. Dr. J, they're an amazing speaker. They give really fun presentations and they walk around way too much for us to keep track of. So, saying hi is really important. Now, this is an interesting one because bathrooms and changing rooms are that space that gets really, really tense and really anxiety-driven. So I've been challenged which bathroom I use for most of my life, even when I was a kid with long blonde hair, which is halfway down my back. And it was the 70s, so it's kind of a bit more understandable. But whichever bathroom I chose, somebody would challenge which one I was in. If you think somebody's walked into the wrong bathroom, just say hi. Because sometimes in some offices I've seen it where they switch them around from floor to floor. So they'll change sides by the side of the lift and things like that. If that happens and somebody's walked into the wrong one and you say hi, they'll go, those are not hand basins, and leave in a waft of embarrassment. Or, hi, those are hand basins, and leave in a bigger waft of embarrassment, because apparently that's far more troublesome of a man walking into a woman's bathroom. But if they haven't, they'll just think you're a lovely, friendly person and keep on doing what they're doing. Because it's about the plumbing you need to use, not the plumbing you have. So that's what it should be about. Bathrooms, the plumbing isn't gendered, for the most part. We all have non-gendered bathrooms at home. So labeling can be great, but it should show what you expect to see behind the door. So here, this is a version of what we did at ThoughtWorks in the London office. So we have a cubicle with a sanitary bin. And we have one cubicle left without a sanitary bin because there are some religions where it would be inappropriate be unclean within the religion for a man to be in a room with a sanitary bin. Like, totally fine with that. We've got them all clearly labelled so people can make their choice of which they use. When we go somewhere where there's toilets and urinals, we show a toilet and a urinal, and we show which ones have sanitary bins. Because some people who you could read as a man will need to use a sanitary bin. Full stop. That's as simple as it is. Include everybody. Now, I'm going to ask a quick question. Who wants the sweary version? Hands up. Oh, cool, that's enough people. How do you tell if a group noun is inclusive? So is guys an inclusive term? Yeah, I know. Spoiler alert. So, would a straight man fuck a guy? The answer is probably not. So therefore, guys is not an inclusive term. I have got a more sanitized version on the screen if somebody wants to capture it. So if the group noun is gendered, it will not include some members of your team. So I have on the next screen 10 very quick gender-neutral nouns. Folks, people, peeps, yous, everyone, team, comrades, friends, pals, crew. Now, those work for me. They might not work for you, but you can come up with 10 of your own that you can use and you can figure out which one will work best for your team. I particularly like yous because it's kind of a bit Liverpudlian and a bit northern, which is where my dad was from. And it's also a bit Kiwi because we'll talk about, ooh, hey yous. Now, what you also want to do is you want to be able to amplify people's voices because we all have privilege and there'll be people in the room who are not so privileged, who are being talked over or not having their voices listened to or will not have their opinion heard unless a man says it. So to anyone who identifies as a man in the room, here's your chance to learn how to amplify. So if somebody's being talked over, or if they've said a really brilliant idea but everyone's just like, and if you say it, you will end up owning the idea. You can flip it up and amplify it. So you can say, Alexandra, isn't it? Yes, I got somebody's name right. So as Alexandra was just saying, and then repeat their idea. And then if somebody comes to you afterwards and thinks that idea is yours, you can go, I'm not sure, but I know Alexandra will know. Alexandra, do you want to talk to them about it? Because that's a way of ensuring that the person who had the idea gets to own it, gets all the kudos for it, but you can use your privilege to amplify them and to really build them up. Because that's really important, not to just repeat somebody's idea, because you will end up owning it. And that kind of plays out in the hierarchies all the time. We've all seen it happen. And the last one is to listen up. Listen to your body and listen to yourself. So, we all know when things are going a bit wrong. You can sense it in your gut. And you need to really, really start sensing it. So this is about those microaggressions. So you'll spot it within a team, you'll spot those things that are going on, and you know that two people don't like each other, or somebody's being a little bit picked on because they'll be talked over. There'll be things like ordering food that someone on the team can't eat. Vegan, gluten-free, it gets you past so many problems. If you go vegan, gluten-free, 99.9% of the team will be able to eat it. Now, it's important about the food because food can be really exclusionary. So one of the agencies that I left, as my leaving cake thing, you know, people buy a leaving cake and celebrate the fact that you've been there for a long time and you've done some good work. They knew that I can't eat milk. They knew that I can't eat cheese. It was a cheesecake. That's not the reason I left, but it kind of sums up a lot. And it was a cheesecake because that's what they wanted. And they didn't think about how that would exclude me. And these are the little things that can sometimes unconsciously happen or consciously happen within a team. Also making comments about someone's appearance. Now, everyone's like, oh, but can't I say anything nice? No, you can compliment somebody, but there's a difference between, hey, that's a lovely dress, and I like that dress. It looks so summery. One makes you feel a little bit on the inside, and the other one's just a nice compliment. But sometimes even the compliments will make you feel a little bit because of the power hierarchy between the two people. So just be aware of when you sense that, because when you sense that, we know it's happening because we're evolved social animals. This is the stuff that we evolved millions of years becoming and understanding. Does that mean I've got 10 minutes left or I've run 10 minutes over? Oh, good. It says minus 10. I was just a bit confused. So listen up. Take the person at the bottom of the pile, and you'll always be able to know who that is because we're evolved social animals. Take that person, listen to them, talk to them about what you've observed, and listen some more. Because that's going to really be important. Because it might be the first time that somebody's acknowledged that they're not crazy. That this is the first time that somebody's acknowledged that there is something going on. It's not just them thinking, oh, it's always like this. Does that make sense? It's called gaslighting. And you're told, oh no, he's just like that with new people. He'll be fine once he gets to know you. No, he won't. He's like that with everybody. So what you do, saying nothing is saying it's okay. Allowing the situation to continue is saying, yeah, this is how we treat people in the team. Now that's not what we are. That's not who we are. You're all lovely people. That's not the sort of thing that we do. So you figure out as a team how you're going to handle the situation. Do you talk to the person? Do you sit down with the aggressor and have a cup of coffee? Somebody who's close to them, somebody who's more senior than them, and explain the problem? How do you deal with it? Figure out as a team how you're going to handle it as a team, because the situation is a responsibility of the whole team. It's not up to the person at the bottom of the pile to sort this out. Because if you leave it to them to sort out, they're just going to go, I can go somewhere else and be treated maybe a little bit nicer, maybe a little bit less nice, but I'm just going to be out of this particular situation. And that's why you often get people who are outside of the norm moving on and on and on from jobs because of stuff like this. So very, very quickly, they are us. This comes from Jacinda Ardern, just after the tragedy in Christchurch where a right-wing extremist from Australia came over to New Zealand, took some automatic weapons into a mosque and shot up the mosques, 2 of them, and killed 50-something people, injured quite a few more. And in the first press conference afterwards, Jacinda Ardern said, they are us. And what that did for New Zealand is it took people who were seen as other and made them part of us. And that's what I'm asking, that's what I'm kind of suggesting that we do. Because if you take diversity and you start off and you go, okay, well, we include gender people, and we include sexuality, and we include people who have caring responsibilities, and we include disability, and we include neuronormativity, and we include people of different ages. You can see how big diversity is becoming. And if we all feel like part of that diversity, if we all feel like part of us, that's really important, because we fight for us. We lift us up. We will go into battle for us. We will make sure that nobody hurts us. And that's really important. If we can start to see that we all belong to this diversity idea, then we're us. There is no us and them, there's just us. And just us will get through. So, because being visibly different costs, because it's energy that you have to expend every single day. Every single time I go into a shop, every single time I go to the bathroom, I have to worry about, will somebody challenge me which bathroom I use? Every single time I go into a shop, I have to worry that somebody, or I go outside my front door, I worry that somebody will read me as something other, as something lesser. And that takes energy. But it's really important to me to be visible, because if we are not visible, we cannot demand that the world makes space for us. Now, I'm not a demanding person. I'm not somebody who makes strong, strident statements. But I want to suggest that if you can make a little bit of space for difference in your team, you'll start to see more and more people of difference come into your team and feel comfortable and be themselves. And everyone on the team will feel comfortable being themselves. And being comfortable being yourself means you relax more at work, which means you get more done, which means you're able to think of better solutions, you're able to write better code, you're able to think of better ways out of that tricky problem, you're able to use all of yourself. So, finally, the introduction. This is me. I'm Dr. J. I gave myself the job title Harbinger of Change. Now, I realised I need to explain that. It's normally, Harbinger is like a herald. It's an Anglo-Saxon word, and it's normally the herald of doom. And the agent of change. So I mashed those two together to create Harbinger of Change. Because if you're talking to me as either a business analyst or about diversity and inclusion, change is very much on the way of what it comes through. That's my, I work at ThoughtWorks. That's my Twitter handle. That's my email address. And so thank you all so much for your time and for your energy and for your patience. And I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you.